So how much time do I have, Joe?
I would say like you've got 50 minutes.
All right, fantastic. So feel free to interrupt, ask questions, and then I'll make sure we finish on time. All right, so I'm pretty open-ended when it comes to presenting. The more questions, the better, really. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
All right, wicked. So I am going to show my screen here. All right, so what I'm going to canter through today. So it's a mix of recorded and real time. So I've got 10 topics, and then, just ask questions. It's fine. Don't worry about it. So the first one I'm going to show you is a recorded video, and this is relevant to me at my job where I was at Sapient. So one of the things we used to do at Sapient was we would create digital strategies. We would charge like maybe 1 to 2 million euros for a digital strategy. And I am trying to find this. Where is it? It is, sorry, wrong window. And we would then take that, and then from there, we would then go into a build, right? So a lot of you from a technology background, so you understand what I mean, right? So companies want like a view of what is their digital strategy, where they're going to go, and then how to get that to code. And then, as a consulting firm or a consultant or a PM, you want to try and make money on this. So I will scrub through this because it takes too long otherwise. So you can go from a digital strategy. The example I'm using was my previous client. So I was at Sapient. My client was NEOM. NEOM, if you guys don't know, is a gigacity in Saudi Arabia, $500 billion in budget to effectively set up a city in the desert, oriented around people and environment and sustainable values. So I'm not going to go through NEOM. NEOM has a bunch of sectors, and we were creating a digital strategy for one of those sectors. So you can go from, you get some, obviously you got a lot of you have probably already seen this, right? You give some context. You say you want to create a digital strategy. And in this case, I went with the food sector, which is where we were. And it'll basically pump out, I want to do this. And these are all the things that, some of these things we actually presented 2-3 years ago before ChatGPT came out and just did it for you, literally, right? And the food sector is effectively about providing secure end-to-end food for everyone that lives in NEOM. And so what do you need to do to build that city where you can always provide, even in the event of a war, drought, famine, world events? So what I did was I created like a digital strategy, and then I went into what if we want to take one of those things and we want to build a product. So I picked here number 5, blockchain. And I said, okay, wicked. So let's take the idea of using a blockchain, and then let's use that to dig deeper. What can you do with it? So you dig deeper, it tells you all the things you could do with the blockchain as it relates to that sector, right? So we can do supply management, you have traceability, you have collaboration and standards. Then I dig deeper and say, okay, fine. I want to now suggest a few blockchains that could do this. So, right, products. So you go straight into products. It gives you a bunch: Ethereum, Hyperledger, Food Trust, VeChain, and these are all real ones from 2012 to 2021. I personally prefer Solana, right? So I said, okay, listen, I like Solana. And now here you can introduce bias into the mix as well. So you can ask ChatGPT to say, hey, give me the pros and cons of Solana, but I like Solana, so give me a biased view. So it generates bias, and you can introduce bias into the mix. We could say it's evil, but hey, I'm sure everyone does this. So it gives you a biased pros and cons view. Then I go from that to say, okay, brilliant. So I read this. Obviously, I can send you the scripts if you want. And then I said, now we have other sectors in NEOM. Can we use this same product that we just defined in the other sectors? And so then it basically goes through and says, yep, you can use blockchain. You can use it in energy and utilities. You can use it in supply chain logistics. You can use it in tourism and hospitality, waste management, water management, finance and payments. And the reality is we were in NEOM FS, and in NEOM FS, we were building a blockchain-based payment rails as well, right? So yes, this is, weirdly accurate. So I said, okay, wicked. Now let's build a product based on blockchain tech that we can productize and take to multiple sectors, right? Because then you can make money off many sectors. So you go from that to say, okay, what do you want to call it? You give it a name. I picked OmniChain from here. And then I said, okay, let's assume we're using Solana. And how do you sell this idea, right? So I said, I want a table of contents. Can you generate a pitch deck table of contents so I can pitch it to the different sectors? So it creates a table of contents. Obviously, you can create content as well. And this is like a very standard thing you could do many times, right? Like if you want a table of contents for a presentation, you could do it, or you could just ask ChatGPT and it gives you a table of contents and you just fill it in. It's like, it just gives you that boost. Then I said, okay, fantastic. Let's create a product. So now I went straight into what we would do in like, if you want to go to build, right? You would want to do an MVP. So define an MVP, create me a quarterly PI. Oh, I said personas. So what are the personas I would use this product? You go from personas to user stories or to epics. And then I went from epics to PI plan. So effectively you can create a PI. I don't know if people know what a PI plan is, but if you're PM, I'm guessing. So for those of you who are in Agile, PI plan is program increment. And so you deliver in like every quarter, 3-month chunks. And so you can basically like generate like a roadmap for the year in 3 quarterly chunks. And then within the every quarter, you deliver sprints, right? So you can use ChatGPT to go from like literally like nothing to a PI plan to estimates, and then sprints, and then user stories for the sprints, and from there to code, right? So basically said, how many people do I need? What kind of skill set? Like, so this is kind of a feature team, what do you need for building the product? And then all the way into like building an app. And this was like 11 minutes of work this afternoon. And so I have done this previously and I've built the code as well, like Rust code, right? So what is my point here, right? So if you are not using something like this to assist your day-to-day job, the reality is your clients are already doing this. And so unless you generate value above and beyond what they can do already for free or for $20 or whatever this thing costs, right? Then you're rapidly falling out of date, right? And it does an entire spectrum of pretty much anything you want to do, table of contents, business case. And it has these plugins now as well, right? And I use this and Bard interchangeably to see what they produce. So far, so good. All right, so we're gonna go from here. So it generates a bunch of code, which is pretty cool. Then I said, all right, write me, oh yeah, so I'm gonna create an image. So then I basically got it to create me an image. And so from here, we're gonna go into Discord. So I will show you Discord in a second. So you basically, anyone here play with Midjourney? Show of hands, Midjourney. Anyone know Midjourney? No takers? So Midjourney is a tool. So I'm going to go to it now. So effectively, while this is running in the background, it is a tool for generating images, right? So I will show you like a real-time example, but here's some examples I did earlier. So I took the example, like the text really from ChatGPT, which was one of these things. Oh, somebody else is in there, a bunch of stuff here. Okay, well, I don't know what happened to what I put earlier, but it creates, effectively, you can create like anything on that you can imagine, right? So I basically I got ChatGPT to write the description, and I used Midjourney to generate those images. So let me just reload. So Midjourney is an image generation, generative AI tool that runs on Discord. So Discord is this chat thing that your kids are probably playing with. I don't really care about Discord. I just want to play with Midjourney. And so you can, and this was my brother's wedding anniversary. So that's why you see these wedding pictures here. Take a pick of anything you want to see, right? So very easy. So it's /imagine. It says prompt. And let's, anybody want to volunteer anything that they would like to see? So if you look at this while you're thinking, so this is like stuff it just generated like in a minute.
Could we generate an image, something to do with Toronto? Maybe some of the Toronto attractions.
Toronto at
the
night.
city.
Maybe the Toronto skyline.
Good.
Which, sorry?
The Toronto skyline.
Yeah, but see, that's not, I mean, that you can just get pictures of that, right?
Okay. Good point.
Toronto on Mars.
What
there we
about
go.
a new logo for the city of Toronto?
Yeah, we'll do Toronto on Mars. So how about like imagine Niagara, something like things that are like odd, right? So oysters, otters, flying otters, right? So things that you would never imagine an elephant crossed with a zebra in water. And it literally like, and then obviously you can play with it, and the prompt of it's very, very easy, right? It's literally /imagine, and then you're just restricted by like your imagination in terms of what you want to see. And then obviously you need to play with it. So here's the Toronto one that's rendering, so 62%. So you could also say, imagine babies flying or parachuting. Or let's say baby raptors. And it's pretty, if you look at that, right? So that's pretty reasonable. So where am I going with this, right? So if you are a graphic designer who spends hours and hours and hours creating these images, and like at Sapien where I was, right? So they've adapted, and so all the graphic designers used Midjourney, and then they use their Photoshop skills on top, and like they're just able to run like 10 times faster than they were before, because they've learned how to like then use or manipulate this system to generate images from, like, instead of starting at 0, they start at like 80%, and they just have to do a few bits on top. People with me? Like it's just like phenomenal, like at the pace at which you could just like generate these crazy images. Like that's pretty real. It's pretty realistic, right? Unbelievable. I mean, some of these pictures you won't be able to say if it's real or not. Questions?
I've played with DALL-E and with Stable Diffusion. Why are you looking at this Discord integration?
It's not really about Discord, but it's more about Midjourney. So the fact that it runs on Discord is just the way the Midjourney team have implemented it. So I have played with DALL-E as well. DALL-E is nowhere near as good. So for example, if you look at some of the pictures I've generated in the past, let's say even the flying a pack of otters skydiving, it is not as good as like what you get out of Midjourney. Stable Diffusion is okay as well. But right now, top of the pack, I mean, like definitely play with all these tools, right? Like don't be like, oh, I'm not going to play with these tools. But Midjourney is really like by far the most hyper realistic. Like it does, so you look at these wedding cakes. I don't know, for some reason I was mucking around with lavender field, looking at the Milky Way, right? Stock market, I was producing I was doing some images for work. And like some of these things, right? It's just, I was doing it like a lifeline. So this is like some weird cell I was creating. It's just like, you can't do this on DALL-E at the moment, but definitely keep playing because obviously they leapfrog each other. So far so good. All right, so
excuse me, are there any image rights to consider?
so with Midjourney, if you pay for it,
Okay,
you could do whatever you want. So I pay, I think it's like $10 a month or something, and the images are mine to do what you want to do with. You can commercialize it, you can make money. People like, there are loads of people like on Reddit and Discord, I see people that have generated images like comic strips, comic covers, and they're making money off this. Like literally like on the combination of both GPT, but also specifically Midjourney, because like visual images are much harder. There is a tool which I wasn't able to get to work. So Runway ML Gen 2. So Runway can do videos real time, but it's not available. So they have demos and stuff, and you can have a look. But effectively, you give it a few words, like like this, like drone shot right here, right? Aerial drone shot of a mountain range, and it will generate a video for you. So you could do text, images, and video, like right now. This is not like the Gen 1 is available publicly, but Gen 2 is not yet. So this is runway. It's very cool. So next topic. All right, next topic. So I'm gonna close this so it's less distracting. So the other thing I quite like with GPT is it's very good at abstract or abstracting. So you could take two things and you could basically say, at an abstract level or at a concept level, what are the similarities and differences between these things? So you could take Monopoly and like another Risk, for example, right? Two of your favorite board games, and say, what are the differences and similarities at an abstract level? And is able to then abstract out across multiple objects and give you commonalities and similarities, which the human brain would struggle to do unless you have a PhD. And once you have that abstract level, you can then derive a third or a fourth artifact from it. So you could take games, derive a book. You could take books, derive a game. So this example I did here earlier was, again, just randomly, right? I asked it to give me a book by Atwood, and I said, compare that to Gatsby. What's the similarities and differences at an abstract level, right? So at a concept level. And it kind of goes through and gives you a bunch of, similarities, dissimilarities. And I've read the books, so I kind of know what these are. And then you can basically say, wicked, now I want to do something with it. So let's create a game that blends these two concepts, and then you'd have a derivative artifact on the back of it. So this is something that humans would, generally speaking, struggle with. But it's superb. Like you could do this like with Monopoly, like games, any book. Take a book and say, what are these, like, not just what is this book about, but what is this book talking about at an abstract level? Are there other books of similar concepts? And because it has all this information, it's able to then kind of give you a reasonable answer. Obviously, ChatGPT is not perfect, right? So there's this thing called hallucinations, or depending on what mood you're in, you could say it's being creative, or it's hallucinating. So you need humans to kind of check and verify, sense checking, right? Like it's not obviously perfect. So I think of it as all these tools give you a 50% head start. And then you're more productive on the back of it. If you are not thinking about it, not using it, then you're starting at 0 compared to everyone else who may be starting at 50%. Clearly, be conscious about personal data and putting personal data into this. You can, from Microsoft, get a private version of it, where Microsoft will sign a T's and C's where they guarantee not to use anything you submit in that private sandbox for training purposes. So that you could do at a corporate level. So if you're at a corporation, you can engage Microsoft and get a private sandbox ChatGPT, and same for Google. So Google's called Vertex AI, where they guarantee they will not use your questions and queries and data into their training data. Questions? All right, so I've done 3. I'm going to go into Cognosis AI. So what people are doing, and I've pre-did this today because it takes too long to run in real time. So you can use a ChatGPT-like function and make it recursive. So what that basically means is, imagine you want to go on holiday, and in this case, I said I'm going to go to Melbourne for a few days. I'm going to travel with my parents. I'm going to travel with my kids. What can I do with my parents? What can I do with my kids? What restaurants can I go to? I need a place to stay. Can you just do the whole thing for me? And so this is an example, and there's a few examples of products like this where it takes that context and it generates a list of tasks, and then it then calls itself to then execute the expansion of those tasks. It could be within ChatGPT-like functionality, or it could be within search as well. So the example here was 5 things for teenagers to do in Melbourne in 3 days, and then with my grandparents, and then places to eat, and my dad is vegetarian. So it basically generated these tasks, right? Search, then it's consolidate, then it does the work, and it says here's like 3 things you could do. for appropriate for teenagers and grandparents. I'm not sure I agree with these things, but hey, right? And it tells you these tasks, it tells you which ones they've done. So top 3 activities for teenagers. So it's giving you teenage activities. Let's see if it's done the food. And so look, it's found some vegetarian-friendly restaurants in Melbourne as well. So these are all things that you could do as humans for sure, right? Like you could basically say, okay, I'm going to find these restaurants, I'm going to find these things. But also you have something like Cognosys, and there's Auto GPT, which I'll show you later, which does very similar. So it's like a recursive search. Now, the scary thing for a company like Google is a company that relies heavily on ads. And something like this, there are no ads on it because it's interrogating Google, interrogating like ChatGPT. It doesn't see the ads, it strips out all the ads. It just shows you like the straight up like formatted text. So there is a possibility where companies like Google could get massively disrupted if people decide, I don't need to go to Google to search for things. I'm just going to use something like this, and it'll do the thinking, it will do the searching, and eventually, if you're comfortable, you give it your credit card, it'll do the booking for you as well, right? Like might as well book the hotel, the flights, the restaurants. And if you need tickets for any of these things earlier, like this railway museum, like just book it for me, right? And the reason I say this is a definite possibility is while I was at Sapient, at Neon, we were building this, as in not necessarily with AI, but this concept of, you're in different life stages. Do you like to travel alone? Do you like to travel with other people? What do you like to do? And then adjusting your itinerary in real time based on, this snowboarding thing you want to do is really busy. So we'll send you scuba diving because we know you like scuba diving. And then moving your itinerary around in real time is something we were building as well. So it's happening. Questions? Make sense? All right.
I have a question about bias in the results.
Yep, there probably is, but
So in like ChatGPT 3.5, for example, the knowledge cutoff is something like 2021. So with these kinds of recursive searches, how do you know that the results you're getting are trained on a reasonable set of data?
I mean, the searches are all real time, right? So what these things are doing is they're searching Google. So it's not like, so it's using a combination of, so when you see what you see here, if you see here, right, it's saying search top activities. It's effectively like just doing a Google search, which basically means like it's the bias that you will get is the bias that Google has. And if you have personalized Google because you've signed in, it knows about you, maybe you'll get personalized data from Google. In this case, you probably won't because this will be like biased towards Cognosys, which is like quite generic. Bias will always be there. The real timeness with these things is pretty reasonable. ChatGPT is, yeah, you're right, September 2021, but that's only like for, like if you're like, say, give me a table of contents for X, it doesn't really matter, right? 2021 versus 2023, unless you ask for like, give me a table of contents for the most recent, world events or something. But there is bias. I think they're doing their best to try and minimize, but there is, and you can introduce bias as well, as you saw earlier, right? I said like, I like Solana, so just do me a pros and cons that favor Solana. It's very, very easy to do. Did that answer the question?
Yes, that's good. Thank you.
All right, cool. All right, so the next one I want to introduce you is a concept called semantic search. So this is the direction of travel where effectively, as hundreds of millions of people interact with ChatGPT and Bard, so Bard is Google's version of the same, slightly different, maybe not as good at the moment, is as it understands you as an individual, instead of just searching for the very first, I just want to go to Melbourne for 3 days, it basically works out that, okay, Anandha's he's going with his kids, he probably wants to do A, B, and C. We know in the past he's done scuba diving and skydiving. Let's see what they have in Melbourne that's kind of in that category of craziness. And so there is a few companies that are building what's being called semantic search, which is understanding the intent of your search and then providing you results in that context. So saving you a few steps. Instead of you having to go, search 1, search 2, search 3, it does it for you. And something like Cognosys is a step in that direction. And both of them have the possibility of like kind of disrupting your, your Google searches type thing. Obviously, Google's working on this as well. So the biggest worry, so the next topic around these things is, are they going to steal my data, and what are they going to do as you submit data, right? Now, if you worked at a company, you have probably hundreds of documents that are in, multiple systems, proposals, pitches, take your pick, right? Probably like oodles and oodles of data. So there's a number of companies, including Microsoft, that are building these private enclaves where you have access to the chat, the large language model, which is OpenAI, but you can also create a little enclave of data which sits within your ecosystem. This is something that could be one of those. It's an example of one. You could run this on your local machine. And what you can then do is you can upload all your documents to it. It sits on your local machine. And then you can interrogate it. Right? So imagine at a corporate level, instead of having like all these documents on Teams and you can't find it, and you have documents on Vox and intranet and SharePoint, imagine you could say, listen, have we ever done a pitch on clean energy for the health sector? Can you find me all the documents that have where we've done this? Can you then generate me a proposal? So I can't really show you because it's kind of confidential, but we did that at Sapien. You would use something called LangChain and SQL Chain. So LangChain is an open source tool where you can then upload your corporate documents in a secure manner and then interrogate them. Very, very cool. It gives you then you then connect it to like your entire internal corporate internet, and then you can then interrogate and have a chat with it. Like another example of where somebody I know is working on something like this. So I'm a big fan of this company called Manager Tools. So this is one like a tool I picked up ages ago for managing people effectively. So they have like hundreds of thousands of podcasts, right? So they have over 1,000 podcasts covering everything from, like business travel packing, one-on-ones, feedback, coaching, body odor, performance management, engagement surveys, the whole lot. Now, the way right now you consume this content is you have to listen to the podcast, or you buy a membership. I have a membership, and then you can read their notes. Fantastic. But imagine, because I know these guys, what I suggested to them, which they were working on already, was they're going to have a chat GPT for them, which protects their IP, where you can then interrogate like over 1,000 podcasts. So you could say, I have an employee and they're not motivated and they have, they're always coming in late. What do I do? And you can then interrogate like this like 1,000+ podcasts instead of trying to like find the podcast and listening to it, which is the traditional way of doing things. So private GPT and like that concept of having a private enclave is something that's it exists already, actually, right? An example of this. So this is a friend of mine. So he's like an investor. He's UK based, invests in Africa. So he then and anyone can do this. So if you go to customgpt.ai, you can basically then like subscribe to the service where you can upload whatever documents you want, and then you can then make it available for interrogation. So this guy who's in his 70s did this overnight. And obviously he's using some service that did it, but like he was like, yeah, I got it. And he just builds like on his own. And it's pretty cool, right? So he's got a couple of books. He uploaded the books, uploaded his bios, his CV, all his like PDFs and all his PowerPoints are all in like sitting behind this. And then now you can basically like have a almost AI-like chat with Tomi. So this is an implementation of like a private GPT using a different tool. So he, for example, right? So this is his framework that he uses for investing in Africa, for example. And this is just like the real time, just hope this demo works. There you go. Questions?
This is a question. This is a question a little bit back on ChatGPT. when you're using the tool, how much knowledge is coming from your input versus what the tool already knows? So I noticed in your like coding example, it was just generating the code. And in your Scrum example or Sprint example, it already kind of had an understanding of the Sprint framework. So how much of that does it understand from your input, and how much of that is coming from the knowledge base itself? And then kind of a follow-up question, when you come back at a later session, does it remember the previous work that you've done?
So we'll start with the last one. The answer is yes. So if you look at this, this is the abstract example, right? I can say, give me a 2-line summary. So it remembers history, remembers context, right? So that's an easy one. The question around how much context do I have to give it? So this is the one I did earlier for this sprint planning and stuff, right? So I mean, let's be clear, right? Like the AI, it is not sentient. It doesn't understand anything. All it's doing is like doing a best guess. What do I think a human would say? What's the next best word they would say, right? Like that's all it's really doing, and it does it really well. So because if you imagine it's been trained on like effectively the font of all knowledge on the internet, like books, sprint books, and like Wikipedia, you don't have to tell it what a sprint is. So right. It's very easy to add, let's say for example, let's pick a, I work, so let's pick an example for publicists. This at the end. I want to set up a branch and entity in KSA meaning Saudi, right? Write me a business plan. So you don't have to, like in this context, I didn't have to explain what a business plan is, right? And it just does all this. So like it has a lot of intrinsic knowledge. It's not sentient. It just does what's the next best word. Actually, I think a human will respond, and it just does it because it has like access to all this like information. It kind of like just works it out. It's bad. It is like magic. Well, if you look at this, right, like company review, market analysis, legal obligations, labor laws, business strategy, kind of makes sense, right? Financial projections, operation plan, right? And this is ChatGPT 3.5, so the new one is better. Does that answer the question?
That's great, thank you.
Wait. So I've shown you Tomi GPT, or let me show you Edge. So this is very, very useful. So I'm going to open up Edge browser. So, I don't know if people know, but Microsoft has a browser. It's called Edge. Literally no one in the world uses it. However, it is quite cool. So they've done a really like a wicked thing where they've incorporated like ChatGPT into the browser itself. It's free. The browser is free. The ChatGPT integration is free. And what you can then do is you can interrogate pages and PDFs. So I don't know how often you get asked, but I get asked often, hey, company X, so I've just joined the OSB. We need to unpack and understand, right? So this is a 260-page document. And so instead of reading the 260-page document, you can basically ask it a bunch of questions, right? So I said, so blue is me. Can you see the PDF? Yep. Tell me about their core values, right? So their core values is somewhere in here. And so this will do both the PDF and search, right? So it'll do both like the static content on the left side and also do like internet search and then ChatGPT on top. So these are their core values, right? Stronger together, and it has reference. Obviously, you can click through for reference. And I said, what's the return on investment? This is a straight extraction from this document. So it's 24%. And say, can you summarize the PDF? So it takes a 260-page PDF and it kind of like writes up a blurb. Who are my competition? It gives you all the competition. So it's just a little like a very, very useful tool, right? So if you have a document that's very large and you don't have time, just load it up in like Edge. Edge is free, and I'm not pitching for Edge. I don't really care actually. And then you can like you click on this Bing thing here, top right, and if you just interrogate it, like it's just like it's like having an assistant and say, listen, summarizes PDF for me. You don't have to, just like all these assistants, what are they going to do, right? Questions? And this Bing thing will do search as well, right? So it'll you can basically say, you can like say, look at this PDF, and then how does this compare to TCS, or pick another company, and it'll do that kind of analysis as well. So the next one, if there's no questions, I was going to show you was AutoGPT and Copilot. So AutoGPT is a bit more rudimentary than Cognosys. I couldn't get it. I didn't have time. I was a bit tired, so I couldn't get it to work on my machine today. And effectively, you run it in like a Docker container, or you can run it on your machine, and it is like you basically give it a role. So an AI designed to teach me about AutoGPT. You give it a bunch of goals, and then it's a recursive, like it'll just do a combination of search, build, summarize, all in like real time. And it comes up with, it's genius actually, right? So it comes up with a plan based on what the goal you've given it, right? So you use Google to search for AutoGPT, browse relevant websites. So it comes up with a plan. It criticizes itself, right? And then it executes the plan. It's genius. And in this, like you can see, it's very geeky, right? So there's no ads because it basically is getting the raw text from Google. So this, like, it's very buggy and it's very early days, but it's absolutely like wicked. Like if you look at what it's doing here, right? AutoGPT demo thoughts. The next step would be to do something. What and why, right? Like it's giving you reasoning, like why it thinks the next step is that. Then what's his plan? Then a criticism on it. It's almost human-like. So this is AutoGPT. It's only on GitHub, so it's not. I don't know if it has a real front end, but if you're geeky, you can get it running on your machine. Very cool. And then the last thing, any questions? Sorry, before I keep going.
I'll save my question for the end, if you don't mind, please.
Sure. Yeah, no worries. And then the last thing I was going to show you was this thing called Copilot. So so if you're a coder, or if you have a team of coders, so you can use, again, with personal data and security concerns in mind, you can use ChatGPT and Copilot to generate code. And every startup I know is using it, and it improves productivity by about 30 to 50%. So any of the basic mundane stuff, it takes away. ChatGPT, you can basically give it some code. Again, just be careful about pasting like IP, like, company code, right? Careful with that. And you can basically say, what does this code do? Can you rewrite this code in Python? Can you refactor this code? Can you scan this code for security vulnerabilities? Obviously, we can do them as humans, but it does it for you at a much phenomenal pace at, like, let's say 80% accuracy. So if you have coders and your coders are not using a combination of ChatGPT and Copilot, they are falling behind. So one I did earlier, and it took minutes, right? Is literally say, write me a code to do the matrix window, like the matrix rain. And I'll just run it for you. So this is the file that I just generated earlier. And this is like 2 minutes of work. So you basically went to ChatGPT and I said, I want you to write me this code. It writes the code for you. I copy paste it into, I'm using VS Code here. I'm running it in Python. And then what Copilot then will do, you can do, so I'll show you an example of Copilot here, right? So like this. You can basically say #Q and you ask Copilot a question. And Copilot is so people who don't know, right? So Copilot is again, Gen AI, customized for code generation. It runs on mainly on GitHub data, and then it's owned by Microsoft. So Microsoft have cornered the market on Gen AI, Copilot, ChatGPT, all Microsoft, right? Like really very, very clever. So you ask it a question, and then it gives you an answer. And you can just repeat this over and over again, right? So here's what I did here. So I copy pasted a calculator thing somewhere, and I asked Copilot to write me a simple calculator, and it basically said C above. literally in real time when I was doing a demo because I had the code up here. So I'm going to pause. So I've kind of gone like broad and all the way into code, and it may be a good place to kind of pause. There's obviously way more, but this is like a decent spectrum. Questions?
Yes, I have a question.
Sure.
I guess I could say asking for a friend. So anytime I have these conversations with my father, who is a much older gentleman, in his era, the managers would purposely give the staff only part of the information. Matter of fact, what they would do is they would give Arthur here half the information and give Kerry half the information and tell both of them, don't tell the other guy you're working on it, and send them both off to work on it. And this genius thing is supposed to be if both Arthur and Kerry come back with the same information. So the question my dad keeps asking me when I tell him about this is, with a human, the manager purposely doesn't give him all of the information, which I know is stupid. We won't go down that avenue. How do you trust this to do your work? Why would it do your work? Put that, please, in terms that I can tell my father.
I mean, it doesn't really do your work. What it will do is it gives you a boost. So imagine you're like a senior, like PM, for example, right? And you had a junior PM, and you might say, hey, junior PM, can you summarize these notes for me? Or can you write up this meeting? Or can you create me a skeleton business case? What it does is it replaces that junior person 100%. Because you have tools that are coming out in Teams, which will summarize meetings for you. And instead of like having a junior PM run around and find out and create some skeleton business case for you, you can just use this, and it gives you better than what a junior PM would give you. So it doesn't, and obviously it may be like partially accurate as well, right? So at the moment, the value add would then be you'd have, hey, you don't need those junior people, which obviously causes a different set of problems. And then it gives you a boost. And then if you're not using it, then you're behind everyone else who is.
Okay, thanks. Quick follow-up question. I've found a little more success with my father and the older, I don't want to sound ageist here, but some of the more senior folks at my church to actually compared, and I know it's not a good comparison, to the fax machine, only because he understands that, in that you're still sending out letters and proposals to Washington or wherever, but now it does it so fast and it does it so efficiently. So yes, the gentleman that would type the thing longhand and mail it out via FedEx over 3 days, that part of the job is gone, but there's still a lot of work. Is that a quasi-good analogy I can use? I've had some success that way. At least that's when he stopped asking me a whole bag of questions. Do you see?
Yeah, but also like the problem you have, or the challenge you have with like the older generation, parents, or even just older generation at work, right, is the same, which is they are, and this is something I covered in my previous, in the exponential thinking presentation, right? If you have a generation that, for whatever reason, right, either because that's what they were taught, if they are stuck in their ways, which often means they're not learning, they're not adapting, they're not keeping up with tech.
Can I interrupt you, man? So the reason why I say that, technology like cell phone and faxing and long distance call, pick it up quickly. The issue here isn't stuck in the way, it is trust. It takes a long while to build trust between, say, myself and Arthur, as against myself and Kerry. I just messed him. I think that's the obstacle that he's stumbling over.
Fine. And generally, I don't really care what, like, to be honest, that generation thinks, because it's not my problem, right? Like my goal is, like, I want to be productive. I want my teams to be productive, and in a work context, and my kids use it. So both my kids are like fully on it. And my dad may use it, may not use it, and it's okay, right? Like, he's retired. It's like, it doesn't really affect him.
And the reason why I'm asking that is that I fear in 20 years I'm going to be my dad asking the same question of my kids. So humor me.
So the solution really is like maybe Joe can do a summary of my presentation at some point in the future, right? Like, The solution is to be adaptive, to be in a curious and a learning mindset, and always be curious and always be learning, and especially around technology, which moves exponentially, and you won't be left behind. And if you choose not to, then you will be, and people are in all camps, and that's okay, right? And
Thank you so very much.
Joe's seen my presentation a couple of times, the previous ones, and it's oriented heavily around like continuous learning, and like the world is moving at an exponential pace and is moving that much more faster. And if you don't learn, and if that's not part of your toolkit, you will be like your dad sooner than you can blink.
Thank you so much.
And that's okay, because it'll keep me employed.
All right, I think Michael has a question.
Is there any further, if we wanted to follow up on like do a deep dive on ChatGPT, is there any articles or resources that you could recommend that we pursue? Anything that you found useful?
Hundreds on ChatGPT. There's hundreds of articles and YouTube and stuff, right? I mean, the best way I think is always like with technology. I find the best way to learn technology is to play and be hands-on. So I struggle, but it's okay, right? Like that's part of like keeping up, for example, right? And I did like literally all this prep. I had sent the agenda, I don't know, 2 weeks ago or a week ago, but I did this prep today at 6 o'clock in 1 hour. And like, but because like I've forced myself to kind of keep up to date, and a session like this forces me to keep up to date, right? Because then I've gone through and picked up a whole bunch of new things. So to answer your question, I mean, the best thing to do is to play with ChatGPT, Vertex. So if you are comfortable, if you log on to a GCP, so Google Cloud Platform, on the Google Cloud Platform, you get Vertex AI, and you can do a lot more with Vertex AI than you can do with ChatGPT. The other thing you could do as well, if you want to play, right, if you're a bit more techy, is you can get an OpenAI key, public private key, and then you can then find code where you can then interrogate like directly from an OpenAI API, like OpenAI API. Now, if you're like the non-technical and then you want to read about the stuff, there's like hundreds and thousands of people writing on it. Like, I don't know. I don't really read any of those things. Sorry.
No worries.
May I add a suggestion here, if I may? One of the great things about ChatGPT is it can tell you about itself. So if you just sign up for a ChatGPT account and then ask ChatGPT, hey, what are some cool things I can do with ChatGPT, or how would I accomplish X with ChatGPT? Some of the results may surprise you.
Yeah, there you go. You can ask it itself. All right, Pubudu.
Hi. So I would like to know, as a web developer, what are some innovative ideas I can design with these AI tools available in the market to present and continue as a business to make a tool which is useful in the present business industry. I asked the same question from ChatGPT. I would love to hear from you as an industry expert. Yeah, thank you.
I mean, I don't know, like you're asking me to come up with a business idea where you can make millions. Why don't you write me a check and I'll send you something, no? I don't know. There's like there's hundreds of ideas. You should pick and choose and play, right? Like who knows what's going to land.
Yeah. Thank you.
Grid.
Any persistent myths or misconceptions that keep coming up in the Gen AI space that you want to highlight? I've seen a lot of kind of misguided posts on LinkedIn and other places. I'm just curious if there's any you want to point out.
I don't. What do you mean, like myths, like the hallucination stuff, or?
Yeah, I mean, I think sometimes people equate hallucinations or semi-coherent GPT-4's like ability to provide reasoning as maybe they kind of extrapolate that beyond what it actually is doing, right? I think a lot of people don't realize that it's predicting text, right, and predicting what sounds most logical next, oftentimes in data sets. But I just don't know if there's anything that you feel like maybe is getting to like Gen AI misinformation.
Yeah, I mean, you have all these videos and people like posting this, oh, like I got GPT to say these stupid things, right? Like I think those are all like just retarded, right? Because it's not sentient. It's not like it's not like you're taking like Bill Gates and got Bill Gates to say something stupid. You've taken a machine that actually doesn't really understand anything to predict something that it doesn't know, right? Like, I don't know. Like where people propagate those kind of things, I don't really care. Like I think it has purpose, and the purpose is it can give you a boost. And this is not just ChatGPT, but ChatGPT, Midjourney, DALL-E, all these tools can give you a boost. And in the context of the work you perform, and in the context of like maybe even your kids, right? So my daughter uses it for self-learning, and she uses GPT and Bard to kind of make sure that the numbers and the things that she's learning are accurate. Like, why not, right? Like, why not add that to your toolkit to like help yourself in the constraints of what it can do? But obviously you need to check because it can give you slightly more creative answers than you may want.
So then quick follow-up is, how do you kind of go about that process of checking or validating? There was that famous case of the lawyer in the United States who pulled out fictitious cases that ChatGPT generated for it in the lawsuit, for instance.
I mean, from a PM context, like I think it's usually just general common sense, because I would ask it for like business plan, digital strategy, business case, like simplify this email, right? Like I'm not using it to like present case law and stuff. But if you are in that context doing that, you need to validate, right? Like I read what I read and I rewrite, like when it doesn't make sense. It's just there's no other real way, right? At the moment. But then obviously you can there are tools that are using GPT to train GPT as well. So there is like the next evolution of this will be like a GPT that's trained by GPT on top of GPT, which is also coming as well. It's pretty whack.
Okay.
I think we're at time, right?
Yeah.
Cool.
But wanted to say thank you so much. So I know that there are tons of questions. This is one of those topics that just generates a lot of discussion and conversation, especially when people are not as familiar with it. I do get it. I do get the fear. But thank you so much, Anandha. Can we get a round of applause, please? I just want to say, like, Anandha's over in the UK, so it is also right now. If it's 7, it must be like what, 1 o'clock over there too. Midnight, yeah. So it is very, very, very late, and so thank you so much for popping by. And again, my mind was blown, and I thought I knew everything about this as well. But you showed some stuff here which also took me by surprise, and I was really happy to see that. So thank you very, very much.
I'm gonna bail, so I'm gonna go crash, right?
Yes, okay.
All right.
Thank you so much.
No problem.
Thanks a
Thank
lot.
you. Nice meeting you. Bye.
Thank you.